Welcome everyone to another week of ADEX Pixel Virtual Expo. And we have an excellent treat for us today as the session for this Thursday in conversation with Mikey is other than Steve Louise. Well, I don't want to just waste any more time. I just want to jump into it and to briefly share, tell everyone who is Steve Louise. So briefly, Steve was born in the UK, but he's a Canadian by choice. He's also a diver, a writer, a columnist, a speaker, and coach with an overriding interest in diver safety. He is also an early convert to technical diving as a valid tool for cave and wreck exploration. Steve is also a recipient of the prestigious International Sheck Exley Award for cave diving safety, a staff instructor and member of the advisory panel for TDI, director of diver, diver for RAID, and a proud fellow of the Royal Canadian Geographical Society. Steve has an impressive number of diver training manuals to his credit, as well as several books, which we could actually, I'm sure we're going to talk about it, which is his 2018 book titled Death in Number 2 Shark, and also which provide a philosophical must-read glimpse into the mindset of exploration divers. It's a must-read, definitely. Steve Louise is also one of the modern diving most accomplished experiences above and below this, and it extends far beyond the ordinary itself. And of course, before I hand over to the amazing Strikey or David Strike for long, David Strike is of course our ADEX ambassador for Technical Diving Pioneer. And you know what, David, I shall not waste any more time. Over to you.
Bless you. Nora, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, the last time that Steve and I caught up was at ADEX at the tech conference in April of last year, pre-COVID days. So it's quite lovely to be able to have a chat with him, albeit a virtual one. Steve, you grew up in London, as did I. And one of the things growing up, the main family event in our household was Sunday lunch. And at Sunday lunch, my father and I would invariably have meaningful discussions to the point where my mum banned us talking about politics and religion. And after a week or so, she also banned us from talking about sex as well. But
yeah, the triumvirate things that
I've always been very mindful of this, but I'm going to break this sort of rule at the moment because, and it's really starting late on in the piece, but I'm still fascinated by the fact that you did the Camino walk. And the Camino walk in Spain, it's started as a religious pilgrimage, but you did it just a couple of years ago, didn't you?
Yeah, actually, I've done it 3 times, and there are various versions of the Camino. There are various ways, excuse me, to cross Europe. You're getting me all choked up here. There are various ways to cross Europe to end up in Santiago de Compostela, which is, you know, this town in Galicia in northern Spain, where there's a cathedral there where it's purported to house the remains of St. John, one of the disciples of some dude called Jesus, and the reason for going there, of course, is to pay homage and to sort of experience the spiritual renovation of being in the presence of this great power. What's really neat about it is that, first of all, there are all these different routes. The classic one, and there was a movie called The Way, which, El Camino in Spanish, as you know, means the way, the pathway. And this movie, a Hollywood movie called The Way, starring, the Sheen family, sort of goes along the classic route, which is the Française, which comes from the border of France, the Pyrenees, and then down through northern Spain and across, about 800 kilometers. The first one that I did was the Primitivo, which is the original pilgrimage route from Oviedo, which is I guess it was a cathedral town, a Roman town. Oviedo is this little town that's about 350 kilometers from Santiago, and it goes through the mountains, and it's really tough, and it's really, like walking over there's parts of it that reminded me of Snowdonia. I mean, it really is scenically very, very moving. And I thought, this is kind of cool. This is really neat. It was a beautiful journey. And when we got to Santiago, there's this, it's like bad, you are suddenly, I think on the 2 weeks that we were walking, I think we saw maybe 3 or 4 people. And then you're in Santiago and there's like a million, so that there's that shock. And then there's the cultural shock of suddenly you are faced with this, neoclassical, Romanesque, Baroque building that is absolutely fabulous. And even though I'm not spiritual, I mean, I'm not religious, I should say, at all. I didn't have any of that upbringing. Thank you, Mum and Dad. I was completely agnostic or, atheist. But it's a spiritual experience. You are hit by the faith of others, I think. And there's this cross section, of hippies and nuns and friars and boilers. So it's something that I would totally, absolutely recommend. If you can do it, do it. And if you want a beautiful route, my favorite, well, I don't know them all, but the Portuguese. So it goes from Lisbon through Porto, along the coast of Portugal, across into Spain, and then does a little coat book into Santiago. Fabulous. The scenery is amazing. Food is wonderful. The wine, of course, great. But the people, when they see that you are a peregrino, when they see that you're a pilgrim, they're like, just beautiful. I mean, people bring you out a cup of tea because you're a pilgrim. It's extraordinary. Is this the 21st century or is this the 17th century? It's really quite remarkable.
I was reading your account of part of it in the Death in Number 2 shaft, and particularly the bit about the sorrow stones.
Yeah. It is said, there's a tradition that if you put your intention into it, so you find a stone on the pathway and you pick it up and hold it and put your intention in that stone, and that intention is to get rid of something that's bugging you, get rid of something that's unhappy, get rid of a bad memory. And you can also do it for other people. You can do that service for someone who is unable to walk the Camino. And later on, after you've carried the stone for a while, you can put the stone down, leave it on the Camino, and the Camino will take care of that angst. And one, it's a lovely myth, lovely tradition, a lovely thing to sort of partake in. But and again, one of the remarkable things is it's psychological, obviously, yeah, but it works. But as you walk along, you will see the markers for the route, and the route is marked pretty well in certain areas. And there's little piles of stones everywhere. So it's quite fascinating because for me anyway, I was looking at these piles of stones, and you're in the middle of nowhere. I mean, like on the side of a hill, it's totally, you know, just you can't see anything because there's a bunch of trees in the way. You know what I mean? Yeah. And first of all, there's this beautiful church that's been built from, you know, limestone or whatever that's been carted up this hill. But then there'll be one of these markers by it, and it'll be surrounded by stones. And you think, this is good news, because all these hundreds of people have got rid of what's bugging them by dropping these stones here. And the Camino is looking after that sorrow and dispersing it. And I think it's putting it all in the United States of America, but that's a whole other.
And that was towards the end of the book. You had a particular incident that caused you to pick up the sorrow stones, and that harks back to the Bell Island mine and the account of the death of a friend.
Yeah, it does. You know, and that was that. I think we've all lost friends through diving, or, you know, other reasons as well, but especially you and I through diving. And that in that particular instance with Joe Stephan, I carried a tremendous, because I had invited him on the trip, and, you know, he obviously had this condition, pre-existing condition that helped to kill him. And I carried a lot of guilt for many, many years. And for me, the Camino is something I'd always wanted to do since I was a kid, or since I was a very young man. And here was an opportunity to actually see if this sorrow stone thing worked. And again, like I said, it's psychological. Did it work? Yeah, it helped me to come to terms with the guilt and to realize that there was nothing that I could do for Joe, and that Joe probably didn't expect to happen what happened. And also, Joe, much to everyone's surprise, Joe was a very devout Catholic. So it seemed fitting to put one of these sorrow stones on what started out as a Catholic pilgrimage.
What was tell me a little bit about the Bell Island mine itself, which sounds absolutely fascinating.
It's a hole in the ground. Yeah. The Bell Island mine has a tremendous history. It's culturally important for the community of Bell Island. And the people of Bell Island are absolutely exquisite. And again, it's that the people on the Camino and the people in the villages that you go through on the Camino and the people in Bell Island, they're the same people. They speak a different language. I mean, you know, they're not speaking Galician or Spanish. They're speaking, I was going to say English, but that's not quite true because they're from Newfoundland. But they're just ordinary. What does ordinary mean? They're just lovely people who are not full of the artifice of civilization, of you know, sophisticated. Oh, let's have a latte, you know, and put, you know, goat milk in it instead of you know what I mean? They're just ordinary people that you can actually walk up to and say, "Hello, how you doing? You all right?" And get a straight answer back. So that's the most important thing about Bell Island, is that this mine, which used to employ thousands of people and was the mainstay of the economy of the island, has gone, you know, but the people are left, and there's not that many of them that still live on Bell Island. But of course, the mine is still there, and they have a little museum attached to the mine, and it's a tourist attraction, and people do go there and visit it. And what's fascinating about it, and I do write about this in the book, and you've read the book, so you know the story. But the mine tour, you walk down a shaft. It's a 10-degree shaft down to the water table, and as with all mines, you know, the pumps used to pump the water out, but the pumps have shut down and the mine is flooded. But you know, there's this 250-meter walk from the surface down the shaft to the water table. And I was there diving the wrecks. There's 4 iron ore carriers that were sunk during the Second World War, and they were carrying iron ore from the mine. That's why I was in Bell Island, to dive these wrecks. But then the first time I was there, we did the mine tour. The guy who had organized the whole thing, a guy called Rick Stanley, who's there in Newfoundland, lives there. He'd arranged this tour of the iron ore mine, and we all trundled down there. And I got to the edge of the water, and I looked at it, and I went, that goes on. That'd be really cool to see what's down there. And that was Rick's idea. Rick wanted to actually open the mine as a tourist attraction, as a possible place that people could come from away and actually visit the mine and see it. And it's below the water. It is industrial archaeology. It is history. It is quite fascinating. It's not just a hole in the ground. I mean, a cave, which is fascinating. A cave, you can get a sense of what's gone on from the layout and the topography of the cave itself. You can get an idea of what went on in the jungle above it, etc., etc. But in a mine, the tools are there. The graffiti's on the wall. The bits and pieces of the detritus of industrial life is laying around untouched on the floor. So, and it's also very vast. I mean, it's when you take people there for a tour, if they want, they can lay new line. You know, they can actually put line down in a tunnel, because there's thousands of tunnels, scores in the area that, you know, you can actually get to. And so they can actually, if they want to, lay new line and explore. And the couple of times that I've seen that done, we've always found stuff that we didn't know was there, you know. So, yeah.
Were you always interested? You were a dry caver before you took up?
When I was a kid, in England, as you know, born in London, but I was brought up in the Hampshire-Berkshire border. And one of the things that interested me were dry caves. So it's not much of a drive from there to the Mendip Hills, Cheddar Gorge and all that stuff. So, yeah, Wookey Hole and all the tourist caves in England.
So what prompted you to go to Canada?
This reminds me of, I don't know if you are aware of the Marcel Proust questionnaire.
I did. I had to have a look and see what it was, but yes.
So, you know, it's like, what's your best trait? What trait do you like in a man? What trait do you like in a woman? And, you know, what made you do this and what made you do that? And I think that you and Simon should actually put a book together, which is the Marcel Proust questionnaire for divers. You know, what is your favorite dive? Well, the terrible thing about what's your favorite, it's like saying who's your favorite child? Because as soon as you said, this is my favorite dive, the instant it comes out, actually before, in the time it takes it.
I did actually ask, what made you go to Canada?
I know, we're getting there. Honestly, I'm going to come back to that. But in the time it takes it to get out of your mouth, you've changed your mind. So you blurt something out. Oh, my favorite dive's the Empress of Ireland. And then as soon as no, it isn't. No, actually, I prefer this one, or I prefer that one. It's like, what's your favorite cave dive? And the cliche is always the next one. Well, that's a cop out. I mean, yeah, come on, like, really? Okay, yeah, there's a trope there. But why did I go to Canada? I tried a couple of other places before I came to Canada. Um, when I was growing up, I have a memory of being in an open canoe, and it was one of these little ponds. You know, it's like less than a meter deep, and you've got all these open, like Canadian canoes. And I remember paddling along and thinking to myself, maybe then, maybe later, what I want is a log cabin in the woods and a canoe. And Canada seemed the right place to go to fulfill those dreams. And in all seriousness, Canada is a wonderful country because, I mean, we have our problems. Don't misunderstand me. This is not all Pollyanna, but people are nice. People are accepting. Our strength is our diversity. You know, a lot of people think of Canada as being, you know, British immigrants, Scottish immigrants, Irish immigrants. It's that and more. You know, there's also people here from Syria, from Egypt, from India, from Pakistan, wherever, and we're all Canadian. And it doesn't matter where you're from. We're all immigrants. We're all uninvited guests, as my native North American, my First Nations friends say. We're all here uninvited. So there's a camaraderie there, and there's a lot of space. I mean, look out of my window. Like, I got my nearest there's a farm across the street where I get my eggs, but you know, my nearest neighbor is 400 meters down the road that way, and then you know, there's another farm about the same distance the other way, and that's important to me. I wanted to be able to live in a place where if I wanted to walk around on my deck naked, I could without sort of frightening the neighbors.
And where do you generally, well, you don't go anywhere at the moment, of course, because of the restrictions on travel, but you've spent an awful lot of time down in Mexico, haven't you, in the caves there?
Yeah. Mexico has a couple of things going for it. Certainly the caves in the Yucatan are extraordinarily beautiful. And it's that, you know, again, another cliche, you know, the Marcel Proust questionnaire thing. Why do you cave dive? Isn't it just wet rocks? Yeah, it is. But the rocks are quite interesting because they're deposits of this stuff that drip down through because all the caves were dry at one time, of course. And during their dry period, they got the cave furniture, you know, the speleotomes, the stalactites and the stalagmites and the flow stones and the soda straws and all this decorative stuff. And in Mexico, they have an abundance of caves. I mean, the Yucatan, there's no solid ground wherever you walk in the Yucatan. Below you is water. It's regardless of where you are, there's no solid ground at all. So there are thousands and thousands and thousands of caves. Many of them are tourist caves. You know, they've been explored, so you can kind of get your cave certification and get your light and go for a little swim and explore. But you're exploring in a, I'm weird. I think cave diving is safer than ocean diving. So, but you can explore these caves, putz around in these caves, and you are, your way out is pretty apparent because there's a piece of string. All you got to do is watch your air and follow the piece of string. And yeah, it's got all that in abundance. There are tons of, every time I go down there, there's a new cave opened up, at least one, sometimes more. So there's lots of exploration going on, which is very, very cool. And the people are fantastic. Now, occasionally in the area where the caves are, in the area around Tulum, occasionally you will bump into a Mexican. The rest of the time, they're all bloody Australians or bloody Brits or Swedes or Germans or French or whatever. it's that diversity, that cultural mix that has always appealed to me ever since I was a kid. And that's one thing I find very attractive. And of course, the Spanish people, seriously, you bump into more than one or two. But they're nice people as well. And they pretend to understand my Spanish, which is fantastic, makes me feel good. And contrary to the belief of the people who live to the south of me, the Mexicans are industrious, hardworking, and honest people. Yeah.
And you do a lot of training down there.
Yeah. The one thing, and I think I sent you my little note about hanging up the fins as far as training is concerned. And there's an irony in being the director of diver training for a dive agency and realizing that there's a conflict of interest in training people, because it's the people that you represent that do the training. You just look after them, you know. So it was a great excuse for me. And as you get older, it's not your enthusiasm, but your ability, right? Your physical ability and the mental ability, maybe, I don't know, but your physical ability to actually look after people should something hit the fan diminishes somewhat as well. So you have to be mindful of that. So I sort of hang up the fins. I don't teach students anymore. I'll teach instructor trainers, but I don't really want to teach punters off the street anymore, except when it comes to cave diving, because I like the idea of trying to get across to people what it is that appeals to it about me, or what it is that appeals to me, not about me, which is the ability to lose oneself in a natural environment that is reasonably unspoiled by Homo sapiens. It's truly, that's Mother Nature. That's where she is. You go in there and it's no bullshit. You can't sort of say, I'm going to beat the cave, because you'll end up dead. That's not the right attitude to go in there. To go in there with fascination and respect is the way to, I think, keep doing it.
And you're very focused on safety now.
Yeah, I am. I don't know why, because I feel more empathy towards pets than humans. I prefer dogs to people, but for some reason I've spent a fair amount of my underwater time trying to look after people.
That I did reread as well, the 6 skills, another discussion that you had, and it's an absolutely superb book. But tell me a little bit about it, or tell the audience a little bit about it.
I'm actually working on a revision of it, because reading, it's still valid. But reading it, I think I can tidy it up a bit and add a couple of bits and pieces. That book started out, and if you've read it, you read the introduction, and that is, I had a ton of notes that I used for training, because I used to train a lot of people back then. And it was all the stuff that I felt needed to be included in a training program of any sort, whether it was rec program or cave program or trimix or whatever. And so it was a series of notes about that, and then thinking about it, and some prompting from a friend, I sort of put it together in a book, and I realized that you could break down. It became obvious to me when I was looking at the chapter structure. Became obvious to me that really and truly you break the whole thing down into 6 categories, and that was it, 6 skills.
And what are those 6 skills?
Oh, I forget. the important one is breathing, and I've got a manuscript that I really do have to find the time to. This bloody outfit is keeping me busy from doing.
The breathing
The
thing I
breathing
found
is a big
absolutely
thing.
fascinating in that book. And you said it sort of harked back to martial arts training. So you obviously did training in martial arts.
It's always like the manuscript that I'm working on is about breathing, and the reason is this. You know, David, we do a lot. You know, the structure of an open water class is quite comprehensive. You know, but the one thing that we don't teach punters off the street about is how to breathe. You think about it fundamentally. None of us, I mean, if you just walk around, I'm sure you can breathe, but I mean, controlling your breath is controlling your mind, controls your body. I mean, if you can control that, and you learn that in yoga, you learn it in martial arts, it becomes a central strut of just about any personal development program or regimen. And yet, as divers, where we're breathing underwater with this bloody thing stuck in our mouth that is completely alien because very few of us are mouth breathers. So we should, I think, be spending a little bit of time on developing that skill with people on how to actually control your breath. And yeah, it's missing. So that was anyway, when I wrote 6 skills, I hadn't fully developed I didn't have the confidence in myself to turn around and say to people, you need to be able to breathe. You know, because it's really out there. You know, you should be sitting there, like concentrating. But I threw it in there, and I think it is the most important skill.
Yeah, I just found the whole book sort of absolutely fascinating, and the different sections, and the skill of emotional control. And I love the little sort of lead-ins. So the quote from Jill Hyneth in that section, who just said, "I'm scared before every dive I make. That's normal. Not being scared, now that's scary."
Yeah.
And you know, they're good little lessons all the way through the book. I found that fascinating. So when do you bring out the new or revised version of that?
Started working on it about a month ago.
Right.
And there's not a lot I mean, it's not a huge rewrite. It's just a question of getting my ass in gear and getting it done. I do want to narrate it as an audible book as well. I think that's important because a lot of us now, I mean, a podcast is the way that a lot of us get our news and information. And I think we don't have the time necessarily to read. And I found when I was driving to and from Florida a lot, the thing that made that 22 to 24-hour journey bearable, because I always did it on my own, usually did it on my own, was books on CD. And now, of course, books on CD have been supplanted by audible.com or audible.ca, depending where you are. And the spoken word is an interesting way to get nuances across as well, because there are things when you write something, especially, I don't know if you find this, but I find when I write something and I go back and reread it, I forget the tone sometimes that what I wrote, and I'll read it and go, what the hell does that mean? And then well, I know, it's said with tongue in cheek, a facile sort of example.
That's most of my writing.
But if you can actually add the nuance of your voice, things sound different, you know. And the enthusiasm may come across.
Did you do that with the Death in Number 2 Shaft? Have you made that an audio book?
No, I want to, and that's again, it's another project that I would love to have the time to complete.
I imagine that you're kept fairly busy, as you say, with Director of Training for Ray. But you've also been involved with TDI, and we're involved.
Yeah,
with TDI.
no longer involved with TDI, but Brett Gillam, the guy who formed TDI, when he was breaking away from INTD, I spoke to him, and he was very enthusiastic about getting people from outside the US sort of Canadian involved, and I put him in touch. I wasn't interested in doing it, but I put him in touch with a guy who became TDI Canada. And Brett is and you've met him and you know him, so you know what I'm talking about. For those people who are listening who do not know Brett and have not interacted with him, he's a wonderful human being. He's the most knocked I've ever been in my life was with Brett Gillen in his living room. Yeah. So Brett is that guy. And he's about the same age as I am. So, you know, he's got some life experience behind him. And he's a very generous guy. You know, people are, oh, Brett Gillen's a real, you know, a-hole. Well, no, he's not. It's actually very genuine, very, very sharing, very, very compassionate in his way. He's just got a wicked sense of humor. So he was forming this agency, and I thought, well, that's a good idea. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to teach nitrox. Nitrox fascinated me because it seemed to me that it allowed me to carry on diving because I was getting old at that time. It gave me an opportunity to do that. And in point of fact, when TDI first formed, I believe I delivered the first nitrox program in French in Quebec. And of the 20-odd people that I had in that first program, I would say at least half of them went on to do other things with me. And before you get the wrong impression, I was married to a French woman, not a French Canadian, but actually Niçoise, metropolitan French. And at one time, I think I spoke reasonably well, but when I delivered that nitrox class in French in Quebec in 1996, maybe, or 95, my French was appalling. It was very much, you know, la plume de ma tante est sur la table. You know, it was straight French, man. There was no embellishments, no idiomatic use of the language. It was very up and down. But it was fun to do. And so that was the TDI years. And I stayed with them for a number of years. And then when Brian took over the company and moved the operations to Florida, I was a consultant for them, worked on the training and advisory panel, worked in product development. And then Brian was going a slightly different direction. You know, he wanted to move the operations back to the north of Florida, and it was time for me to sort of move on. And then I carried on teaching for TDI for a little while, and then a guy called Paul Toomer, who I knew, said to me, I was an instructor trainer, I guess, for RAID, and he called me up one day and said they'd made me president of RAID. And I, oh, congratulations! And he said, would you like my old job? And I said, what old job? He said, director, diver training. And I said, why? Anyway, he convinced me. And so that's when, and of course, as a staff member of RAID, I can't teach for another agency. So my parting with TDI was emotional in a way, because they were a good group of guys. Brian, Sean Harrison, Chris Mertz, Paul Montgomery, all great people that I had some great experiences.
How long were you with them for, Steve?
From the start until 2016.
Oh, right. Okay.
So 22 years.
Yeah. And you were running the Tech Diver Forum.
Yeah, that was
during that same sort of period of time.
That was way back in the very early part of that. That was when the internet was steam driven, and we had to beat the velociraptors off of the computers to actually get to them for the keyboard. Yeah, that was fun. Those were the George Irvine years, you know, as you well know. Yeah,
The
yeah.
bête noire of tech diving.
The bête noire of many things.
Yeah.
Tech diving being one of them. Yeah, yeah. And there's another sort of history there. You know, I think that George was the Kurt Vonnegut of diving. You either liked him or you hated him, but you could not deny the fact that he had some interesting viewpoints, and he certainly very, forgive me for generalizing about a nation, but very American in his outlook, you know, we're the best sort of thing. And firmly believing that. And the funny thing about it is that I think he thought that people believed him. And of course, the rest of us are going, you know, like, really? But what he was saying was fundamentally true. It's the same as what everyone else was saying, but what he was saying was actually was the right message. He was just saying it, I think,
the manner in which
the wrong emphasis on it. You know?
Yeah.
But my, you know, when I learned to dive, the guy who taught me to dive originally was, I think, I don't know, an ex-commando, or he might have been SAS, I don't know. But he was very much this: if you don't do this, you're gonna effing well die, you know. So it was the same bluntness, the same, a very similar approach to the Irvine approach, which was, I'm telling you this for your own good, listen up.
And I know at one stage, I mean, he was very opposed to rebreathers early on. There used to be those enormous sort of arguments with rebreathers.
Well, yeah, but then again, you know, one of the things, and you and I are of a similar vintage, and we have seen things change, not just in diving. I mean, in our lives, in the world, you know, things undergo change. And the usual lesson that one learns from that is dogma is for the Catholic Church, or, you know, whatever, fundamental religion. You know, dogma paints you into a corner from which you cannot extricate yourself. Once you've been dogmatic about something, you are done. There's no flexibility there. And dogma is unscientific, because, you know, the key of science is, this is our theory, this is a peer review of it, and you know what? At the moment, it's okay, but it might change. Please test it and see if it works. GUE, this you know, and the whole thing that came out of George, was very dogmatic about things like, you know, you've got to have black fins. You've got, and I mean, Jared Jablonski was my cave instructor, my original cave instructor. So, you know, I love Jared. I think the guy's definitely, his heart is in the right place, and has a very different approach to George's approach. But very dogmatic. It wasn't him being dogmatic. It was his disciples being dogmatic. And, you know, the people saying, well, if I dive to rebreather, I'd have to not dive with myself because I'd be a stroke. And of course, things change. Attitudes change. Fundamental, you know, essential engineering changes. And, you know, what's happened with lights and cameras and power packs and the standard of dry suit manufacturing. Little plug for O3. Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You know, things change, things develop, and I don't think it's very difficult to turn around and say, this is the way it is. You've got to do this. Much better to say, I found this works, and I'll carry on doing it until someone comes along with a better idea. You know?
When did you get into rebreathers, Steve?
Oh God, you blame Brett Gillen for that too. It was the semi-closed circuit dolphin, you know, rebreather. Yes. And then the first rebreather I really played around with, that was a lot of fun, was completely manual. It was a Pelagian, and literally fix it with a rock and a railroad spike. Very, very simple, and a lot of fun to use. And that was really my introduction to it. Then at some point, Jill got me on a Ororobus, the complete diametrically opposite to the Pelagian, very simple, and this other one, all the bells and whistles. And
that was Kevin Gur's thing.
Yeah, it was Kevin.
Yeah.
There's a character. Some of the people that we bumped into are really, you look back and go, oh shit, I wish there's a person I'd like to get under the Marcel Proust questionnaire. Ask that guy some of those questions, Yeah. So rebreathes are a great tool. In fact, this coming weekend, I'll be going up to Tobermory and I'll be diving one of my rebreathers up there. And the benefit of that is often not spoken about is the fact that it's very cold water. It'll be 4 degrees under the thermocline up there. Always is, the Great Lakes. And using a rebreather in 4-degree water is fantastic because you're breathing warm, humidified gas. So, the strain is less than if you were, diving on an open circuit.
Yeah.
But the rest of it, rebreathers, I hate dive equipment. Absolutely hate it. I got about $25,000 worth of dive equipment in Mexico right now, which I can't get at. But I've got a lockup down the road, a little garage sort of where I keep. It's full of dive gear, and
Can you hear me, Steve?
I disappeared for a while.
Yeah, everything went blank.
Well, that's okay. It's probably, deserved.
Now, you started your own publishing company as well.
Yeah. When I decided I would publish a book of my own, without it being a manual for a training agency, one of the publishing houses approached me and put the deal before me, and I realized very, very quickly that I could make more money by publishing it myself. And Jill and her husband were quite helpful when it came to how to do it and what to do. So Robert and Jill who are good friends, sort of steered me in a direction, and that's what I did.
And do you still see Jill regularly? I know
not these days, because nobody sees anyone these days. But keep in touch with her. Obviously, she's a very good friend. The cliche, the trope is she's my sister from another mother. But I like her very much. I respect her, of course. And I think the last time I saw her was at a Canadian Geographical event.
Right. You're a fellow of the Royal Canadian Geographical Society.
Yes, indeed. I have a badge to prove it. Yeah. And actually, to be perfectly honest with you, I don't join clubs. In the mid 2000s, I was elected to the Explorers Club, and I never really signed up. I was very pleased to be elected. It was like, oh, great. But I don't join clubs, and I hate the whole concept of the old boys club, sitting in a leather Chesterfield or sitting in a leather wing back chair with a cigar and a snifter of brandy or Courvoisier or something.
Sounds like Monty
I
Python.
say, did you see the Times yesterday? There was a wonderful article on Mozambique. Like, oh, screw that. It's not my bag. I mean, I'd much rather be out there doing something rather than going to the Explorers Club. And I with all due respect to the people who do this, and I mean, I'm sorry, but this is my take on it, and my take is wrong, but I'd rather go for a bloody hike down the street here. I'd do the 12-kilometer circuit. If I go out my front door and turn left, I can come all the way around and come back from the right. I'd rather do that. I'd rather just be there. I'm an only child, so I like being on my own. I don't, and crowds sometimes crowds are a bit difficult for me to handle. So there you go.
Right. And I'm sorry, I'm going to get back to that Marcel Proust questionnaire now, because interestingly, there have been actual questions. So, of any caves in the world that you would like to dive and explore, we've been asked, or you have been asked, the top 3, please.
Whoa, 3 that I know. There's a couple in Brazil that I can't remember the names of, but they're fabulous. But really, the 3 caves that are fascinating: the Eagle's Nest in Hermosa County, Florida. The Eagle's Nest is a very good friend of mine, a guy called Larry Green, taught me trimix as a diver. And the reason that I chose to do it with Larry is he had the keys to the Eagle's Nest, which is a deep cave and quite fascinating. Secondly, almost any cave in Mexico. I mean, there's a ton of them. So, make your choice. And this is one of those, you pick one and then a second later you think of something else. So, a cave in Mexico in Tulum, in the Tulum area. And so that's 3, isn't it? One in Brazil, one in North Florida, and one in Mexico.
Just as an aside, what other caves in the world have you dived? Which other?
France, England, right. Brazil, North Florida, Mexico. Right. That's it, really. And the Bahamas are beautiful because one, you've got a guy down there who's he is the source of all information. But right. The caves are very much like the caves are very much like they are in Mexico. They were dry caves at one point. They got the formations in them, and that's really it. Yeah.
Is that the fascination for you? The formations, the geologic structures, or?
Yeah, because it became apparent very early on, like swimming through a cave and looking at, and this happened in a cave. This happened in a cave, and I can't remember the name. But when you look at the layers of sediment that are making up this formation, you can see, that layer there. That's a sandstorm in the Sahara Desert blew across the ocean and came down in the rain and, was deposited here. And it's almost like a history lesson. But where the history is written, not in a couple of days, but in tens of thousands of years. So there's that fascination. And there's also, and this really is going to sound like I've had too much Campari, you can feel, you have to touch it because you shouldn't, but you can feel the energy coming off this stuff. And again, it's psychological. I mean, it's not, can you measure energy coming from it? Actually, probably, but you just need the right meter. But you can actually feel what's there. You can feel the gravitas of these formations of this place. And again, it's not made by humans. We had bugger all to do with this. In fact, all this happened when we were all running around in in southern Africa, coming out of trees and being chased by lions and stuff like that. So it's not been influenced by. There might be a piece of string over there, where someone's explored it for the permanent lining, but this hasn't been influenced by people. It's pure nature, and we haven't buggered it up yet.
And there was another question there. Sabine was really interested in the breathing aspect you mentioned. Is it focused on breathing during dives, preparation, or stress situations?
All of the above. If you can control your breathing, you will not get stressed. The reason that I'm still alive is that someone introduced me to meditation early on in my life. So, that's a great way to. Meditation is about controlling your body, right? Controlling your mind, controlling your body. And the pathway to that is through controlling your breath. If you're in a situation underwater where something hits the fan and you can control your breathing, you can control everything. And I mean, one of my favorite lines to students used to be, as I can teach you underwater, I can teach you differential calculus. I really can. All we're going to need is enough gas to stay down there long enough for you to get the concept. But if I've got a waterproof marker and we've got enough gas, I can actually teach you differential calculus. I really can. It doesn't matter how good you are at math. It doesn't matter whether you did pre-calculus at school or you're a total klutz when it comes to math. If you've got the time, you can do anything. So one of the things to make sure of is that you conserve the amount of gas that because we don't take down tanks and tanks and tanks and tanks and tanks. So if you have a way of conserving, and I don't mean skip breathing, I just mean consuming the gas in a circumspect way, then you've got time to fix anything. I remember teaching a cave class, and back when lights were, motorcycle batteries and things, my students, the little loop that he had, fixing the light to his belt gave way. And I remember, he was like, "Oh, look what's happened." And I took it and I told him to calm down and sit there. And, I took the light, took my pouch off, took the tools out, undid it, did it back up, threaded it, put it back on him. And I guess it took about, 5 minutes. To him, it probably felt like half an hour. But, and when we got out of the water, he said, "Where did you learn to do that?" I said, "Learn to do what? Like a slot head screw in a worm gear?" "Well, I learned to do that when I was a kid." "No," he said, "just to be that calm." And I sort of thought about it because I hadn't given it that much thought. It had to be done, so it was done. And I thought to myself, Tai Chi, learning how to breathe. That's it. No secret.
We're getting perilously close to running out of time, but just one other thing. You appeared in the first issue of Dining with Divers that Simon and I compiled.
Yeah.
And one of your other sort of many talents is actually being a chef, isn't it?
Yeah. I love cooking. There's something about sharing food that is culturally very important to every culture. I mean, one of my grandmas was Jewish, and there's the cliche, again, the trope is that, if you're Jewish, it's always like, eat, eat. And I don't know whether it comes from that or it's just something else, but there's a tremendous satisfaction in preparing food for someone and sharing that food with them. That's, to me, it's one of the sweetest things that you can do for someone is to actually prepare a meal for them. And I like experimenting. It's when I was a kid, I had a chemistry set, and you mix this and this, and something happens, and it's like, wow, that's fantastic. Well, cooking's the same, some of this, and so, oh, look at that. I've never used that with chicken before. Let's put some of that in, and you put it in. It's like, wow, this is great. Or sometimes terrible. You know, like you
Yes,
with
it
your
sounds
molasses,
like
your
it's
molasses
not
and your
lobster
eggs.
pie.
Yeah.
And there was another question as an author. Do you have any top 3 dive books you recommend anyone to go for? Fairly obviously, Death in Number 2 Shaft, The Six Skills and Other Discussions, but
And
there
staying
must be
alive.
one more.
um, yeah, I mean, I think Simon has written, has published some very, very interesting books. So Simon Pridmore,
Yeah.
look him up. I like the books that you've done with the dining with divers is a pretty cool way to approach things. Books by Jill. I think one of the fundamental books is probably Mark Powell's book, Deco for Divers, is a tremendous book as well.
Yeah. I think we're getting just about to the end, are we not, Nora?
Yes, we do, but I'm really, really enjoying this discussion. It was so fun. Just to everybody, before we actually start live, we were talking about food, and now we're going to end somewhat quasi food as well. So it was really interesting that from diving to spirituality to cave diving and then to food. So yeah, I truly enjoy it. But I have one personal question. I know that you spend quite a lot of time in caves of Mexico. I mean, in Mexico, and I'm sure you heard of this crystal caves. The one in Nica in Chihuahua, I think, in Mexico. It's a dry cave, if I'm not wrong. I was wondering whether are you aware of that, or have you actually been there?
I'm aware of it, but I haven't been there. There's a mica cave in probably more than one in Ontario, and it is a flooded ex-mica mine. And I poked my head in there and scared the life out of myself and turned around and got out because there's a lot of sediment and a lot of detritus around, a lot of silt. But that's a mica cave. The crystal cave is absolutely fascinating, absolutely beautiful. And again, it comes back to the whole chemistry set thing. Here are these crystals that essentially it's one crystal, and it's the size of an elephant's leg. You know, quite very fascinating. Lovely things to see.
Yes, I do agree though, because all I can see is the videos, which is so beautiful. So once again, I'd like to thank both Strikey and also Steve for your time to to share with us your story and also your philosophy, and of course the book that we all should be reading, both actually divers and also Death at Shaft number 2. One last question, one last shout out to everyone out there. Please do stay tuned for 8 p.m. session later. It's going to be a discussion on Fish 101, which is going to talk about the diversity and ecology of fish in general by this really young marine biologist called Marta Panero. And also tomorrow, we're going to have 2 interesting sessions. First is a cave diving panel discussion talking about caves in Indonesia. So that will be interesting. And also the second one is a talk by this ocean artist called NK, which we would probably seen her in ADEX year to year, showcasing her beautiful artwork. So before I actually close this session, yes, Strikey, yes.
I was going to say, in the normal course of events, there'd be a sort of a 2-week gap, but next week is the ADEX India Virtual Expo. So the next conversation with a prominent person is at the end of the month, the 24th of September, and that's with Richard Harris, Dr. Richard Harris.
Fantastic. Harry.
So once again, Steve, it was lovely to catch up with you, albeit via Zoom. And I do look forward to hopefully catching up live one day, and preferably when there's a beer or two around.
We'll speak about Dr. Desmond Morris and zoo time, and by then
Yes.
I will have found out or remembered the name of his chimpanzee.
Okay, Steve, thank you. Nora, thank you.
See you, folks.
See you.
Bye.
And stay safe, Dimas, and hopefully to see you in ADEX 2021, hopefully.
Bye.
Bye.